Spring has sprung, and with the new season, we bring back the Southeast River Forecast Center Water Resources Outlook. A variety of factors have contributed to its absence, but we plan to release a new WRO each month for the foreseeable future. We will evaluate this product going forward and would appreciate any feedback from our users about what you like, what you don't use, or anything that we might do to help you make informed decisions. We plan to evolve the Water Resources Outlook and the program going forward, and your input could help craft what we do. With that, let's get the Water Resources Outlook started with Jeff talking about our climatology.
Okay, thank you, Todd, and we're glad to be back. Back showing you the latest past precipitation maps, and here it is, the last 30 days of precipitation. And we see the heaviest amounts have been up across the northern tier of the southeast region, across northern Alabama and northern Georgia, and across the southern Appalachians, but another area down there across North Florida as well. On the flip side, eastern sections of the Carolinas and the Florida Peninsula seeing lower precipitation amounts relative to the region. So how does this compare to normal? Well, we see most of the region there in the darker yellows and oranges indicating deficits in precipitation for the past 30 days, and even some red colors there across the southern half of Alabama toward the lower end of the Alabama and Tombigbee River basins near Montgomery, Alabama and south, indicating deficits of more than 4 inches for the past 30 days in that area. That's a more recent look. How are we looking since the beginning of the year? Actually, not too bad. A little above normal in some areas of Alabama and Georgia into South Carolina, but mostly normal with the Florida Peninsula running several inches below normal at this time. With their wet season still a few months away, we'll have to watch this closely. And so streams have been affected by these recent wet and dry periods. And we see it here, lots of green dots on the map, meaning near normal stream flow for many gauges, but various areas like eastern North Carolina and part of the Gulf Coast seeing those orange dots, and that is where gauges are indicating below normal stream flow. Mind you, this is typically the high flow period time of year for most of the southeast, so most streams have a decent flow to them relative to the year. But we'll have to keep an eye on them as we head into the warmer months and the months where runoff and water can become an issue. The winter and early spring are our primary recharge months. We see that here in March. The eastern U.S. has a high precipitation, a high proportion of their annual stream flow during March, but this won't last long. April can be a dry month for the southeast, and by May, stream flows as a ratio of the entire year typically come down in the east, especially southeast. This helps the flood threat to be lower. That flood threat shifts west into the plains and Rockies when stream flows pick up. This is the spring stream flow shift from east to west from March to May. Even a better map to show the typical period of high stream flow across the nation, and we see from the Ohio River Valley to the Gulf Coast and southeast region, except the Florida Peninsula, stream flows are typically highest in winter to early spring. Out across most of the interior west, it is spring to early summer in most cases. Of course, the Florida Peninsula has its own wet season, the summer convective season and tropical season. And so speaking of flood season and flooding, we're in week 11, and this really is near the peak of when we typically see river flooding. We typically have about 4 more weeks, and then that threat seems to drop off based on climatology. This year, the winter was somewhat active, but so far the warmer weather and sporadic rainfall has kept flooding at bay. So good news on the flood side, but what about drought? So here's the latest drought monitor for the southeast, and we see, as we talked about the dryness in Florida, we see moderate drought and even a little severe drought there in South Florida and the Florida Peninsula. We still have a few months to go before the convective wet season starts up for Florida, so even though by summer we could see some alleviation of drought, we'll have to watch this closely through April and May for lower stream flows and potential water issues.
Thanks, Jeff. And now we'll take a quick look at the next 7 days. Behind a cold front that brought some rain late last week, cool high pressure has set up and quiet weather has prevailed. This high will remain in control through much of this week, as we see the southeast remain rain-free through midweek until the next front starts approaching the region late Friday night. As the surface low deepens over the central plains, its associated cold front will bring the next round of rainfall through the day Saturday, largely clearing the area by Sunday. There is another chance for rain early next week, as you can see on the Sunday surface chart with thunderstorms along the Gulf Coast. Looking at the 7-day total precipitation forecast from the Weather Prediction Center, we see higher totals of 2 to 3 inches across northeast Mississippi and the northern half of Alabama, diminishing as we go east with 1 to 1.5 inches across the northern half of Georgia and down to less than a half inch over Virginia and the Carolinas through southeast Georgia and into Florida. Most of this will be coming overnight Friday into early Saturday morning. Looking a little bit further ahead, the week 2 outlook from the Climate Prediction Center has the southeast leaning to be above normal precipitation. Much of this is expected to fall early in the week 2 period as warm, moist southerly flow from the Gulf of Mexico produces some rain ahead of another cold frontally driven round of rain right behind it. And now I will pass it off to Todd for a look at the longer range.
Thank you for that, Aaron. I'll take us through the spring and into our summer. Our first outlook focuses on the temperatures in April. Late February and early March brought warmer than normal temperatures. While recent trends have been below normal, by the end of March, temperatures warm again in the southeast U.S., and as the graphic indicates, that trend will continue into April. The green up and leafing out of trees came early this year, and that means competition for the water started early also. With March rains being predominantly below normal and plants blooming and leafing out in the southeast, flooding from rainfall has not been as widespread and frequent as the U.S. as our climatology would indicate. While the temperatures remain warm, the Climate Prediction Center doesn't have an indicator to nudge the southeast to above or below normal precipitation, and instead keeps us in the equal chances category, meaning that they have the same chance for above normal, near normal, and below normal precipitation for the month of April. April and May become transitional months between the frontal rains that affect us during the winter and the severe convective rains, pop-up thunderstorms, that will occur later in the year. As we start to look a little further out, we'll take a look at our ENSO forecast. After nearly 3 years of La Niña conditions with below normal temperatures across the equatorial Pacific Ocean, warmer water below the surface is beginning to reach the surface, and neutral conditions are likely through the rest of spring. As you look at the upper left-hand corner of our graphic, we do see that we've gone from the La Niña, and the forecasts are all indicating moving through neutral and to that El Nino. You look at the lower right-hand corner, this just shows the chances of each of the different phases, whether it's neutral, La Niña, or El Nino. And as we get to the late summer and to the fall, it looks like El Nino conditions are most likely. How does that affect our weather in the southeast? Well, we'll talk about that as we look at the Climate Prediction Center forecasts here in a moment. For the seasonal forecast for April through June, we show equal chances of below, above, and normal precipitations for the area, with above normal chances nudging next to our area from the north. With neutral ENSO conditions and just barely getting into hurricane season, flooding looks less likely at this time. However, as you've seen from the climatology earlier in the presentation, flooding is possible at any time of year, so remain watchful through the spring. The drought outlook, which covers the same period as the seasonal forecast I just showed, indicates improvements across Florida. While the forecast is for equal chances, even normal rainfall should improve conditions across Florida. While the dry season in Florida has been especially dry following a very wet fall, the season will begin sometime during May and should improve conditions in Florida before the end of June. And finally, the summer forecast is indicating a better chance of above normal rainfall through much of the southeast, while going into an El Nino tends to dampen hurricane activity in the Atlantic by disrupting storms before they can form. It may not have quite the effect on the early season and what develops in the Gulf and Caribbean. Either way, models are hinting at above normal precipitation for the summer into early fall. This would likely keep us out of serious drought situation with maybe only small patches of drought developing in the area. So the bottom line, in the short term, normal rainfall activity through the rest of March. Flooding is less likely, but still possible through March, simply because we've leafed out so early. We're starting to get competition for the water, and we're not looking at, right now, above normal precipitation. But again, it's something we have to watch pretty closely. In the long term, neutral ENSO likely developing into El Nino as we move through late spring and into the summer. So a normal spring and a slightly more active summer for the southeast U.S. We will record our next water resources outlook on April 20th, 2023. Have a great month, and we'll look forward to chatting with you then.